I don't give a shit what the founding fathers thought.
Yeah, that's human success. Not ending poverty, it's running really fast.
This is fucking reality TV, man.
Nicknames after your 20s are kind of a bad look.
All right, well, here we go. We are Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I'm Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori.
And let's rock this thing. Let's go.
All right, so our first segment is what we call the Shitty Minute, we affectionately call the Shitty Minute. That's where one of us rants for about a minute, usually more, on some cultural event or otherwise opportunity that's really grinding our gears. Austin, this week you've got the torch.
Yeah, so I am going to talk about what the left can learn from Christian apologetics. Apologetics is defending the faith, how to argue philosophically or theologically to defend your faith. And there is one particular thing that I think that leftism can glean from the apologetics tradition within Christianity. And it's that leftists tend to be critical assholes. They're grumpy, they're angry, they're smarter than everybody else, and they just have this like shit face, and they want people to know that they are grumpy. And the perfect metaphor that I can think of for apologetics is the idea of pointing at the sun, right? And leftists always criticize Christians for this. Like, man, Christians are such assholes. You know, why would I ever want to be a Christian? You're an asshole. It's like, okay, yeah, they're absolutely assholes. But the idea in a perfect apologetic community is that you're pointing at something that is lovely, right? So let's imagine the sun. You got the sun, it's beautiful. It does all these wonderful things. It makes you golden brown. It gives you vitamin D. It makes you happy. All you got to do is point at it and extol the virtues of the sun, right? Seems pretty simple, but that's not what generally happens. People are Christians, you know, if they're trying to point at the sun, they're like, look at the fucking sun, asshole. It's beautiful. You need it. You need that vitamin D or you're going to die. And then people are like, fuck you. I don't want to look at the sun. You're a dick. You're in the way. Well, leftism kind of has that same problem. Leftism has that same problem. They're like, look at the fucking truth. Marxist economics, anarchism, leftism, Trump is an asshole, Republicans suck. It's like, yeah, all those things are true. But if they're beautiful and you're a cause, human freedom and freedom of exploitation and oppression, if those things are as valuable as we claim they are, then why don't we just like gently point at them and be like, hey, why don't you look at the sun? It's fucking gorgeous. And then extol the virtues of leftism rather than being critical, cynical, negative, grumpy-faced, academic douche nozzles.
That was hot fire, bro.
Yeah, dude, I'm bringing that heat.
Although, to continue the analogy, if you stare at the sun too long, then it'll burn your retinas and you'll be blind. So,
yeah, burn those fucking retinas. Burn them.
I mean, if you become a true blood Marxist, then you're gonna like burn your class consciousness down.
Yeah, you'll turn into a bloodhound, and your olfactory senses will be enhanced massively, and you'll just navigate through the sense of smell. This is all a metaphor. We're keep pressing this metaphor. Let's go deeper and deeper. I like it.
All the way.
Yeah.
No, I dig it. Something about being a leftist and a misanthropic asshole seems almost synonymous, but
okay.
Hopefully there's hope for that.
Yeah, but I think that hits the head. I think actually that the real misanthropes are those who deny materiality and deny immanence in favor of idealistic positions. So that would be typical Christian theology or idealism, conservative logics, anything like that refuses to affirm the immanence of life in favor of some sort of transcendent ideal. That is true misanthropy. But the leftist position is actually, it comes from a genuine affirmation of life. So like Zizek is the perfect example because he likes to act like he's a misanthrope and that he's this weird neurotic outlier. But he loves humans, man. That's where his whole position comes from. It's from the affirmation of life, the affirmation of environmental causes, the affirmation of the ecological system and politics and trying to make those things better. He just does it in a way that's kind of like weird and pseudo-misanthropic. But he's not. He ultimately is trying to seek the release of the flows of human freedom and creating more equitable social and political orderings.
Yeah, we said last week the cynics are the biggest believers, right?
Maybe there are no cynics then ultimately, right?
No, the real cynic is the person who wants it to be that way, right? Who wants human, the free flows of human liberation to be caged.
Exactly. I actually had this thought this past week, actually, that Christians tend to be extremely cynical. That it is a position, conservative Christianity is a position of extreme cynicism because it denies the vitality of the material world in favor of some transcendent other, or transcendent future, or transcendent idea. And that's true cynicism.
Which is a pretty good segue to our med segment, because today we're talking about the phenomenon of evangelicals loving them some Donald Trump.
Yay.
Not sure why that was the response.
Oh, man, I'm kind of at that point right now in the political system where I don't really give a shit about the day-to-day political stuff, right? So I refer to it as popular politics in a lot of my engagements. I get so bored of who cares who's up so many points according to Reuters poll or the CNN poll or the Fox News poll or whatever. It's going to change, man. We got an election in November. Get the fuck over it. What really interests me, though, is the type of discussion that we're going to have today where it gets below the surface. Let's not engage with popular political discourse, which all seems to be deflections for really engaging in the meat and potatoes of political discourse, which is getting at the ideological underpinnings, the political, ethical, and social implications of the political decisions and political activities of the candidates and the people that support those candidates. That's where real political discourse should take place. Not this bullshit, oh, he called her this and she said that he's unfit for the White House. I mean, I get it. That stuff makes for good television, but it really is reality TV. People keep trying to make this thing like, it's not reality TV, this is real politics. Actually, I beg to differ. This is fucking reality TV, man.
Yeah, I mean, can we also add that political discourse only really happens when two white guys talk on a podcast?
Oh, yeah, a middle-class white guys, too.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of goes without saying, right?
Yeah, suburban white boys who are...
I live in the desert, yo.
That's hardly a desert. That's the suburbs of L.A., bro.
I got more goats around me than people.
Okay, you win. You're right. I'm sorry. I apologize. How dare I? I have more dogs around me than people. Because I'm in straight-up Yuppieville, where everyone wants to have 2 or 3 dogs.
In the OC, dogs are basically people, right? Like, you can probably kill a person and get less jail time than if you kill a dog.
They wear nicer clothes than the average human.
That's probably true.
Well, okay, so let's start off by let me qualify first, before we even really get into it, and say that genuinely this episode really does, for me, come from a position of love. Because I still deeply care about the Christian community. I have so many friends within that community. My parents, my father and my stepmother are still very committed to the Christian church, and I think there's something beautiful about it. And I still have a soft spot for Christian communities, for Christian people, and even the Christian tradition in a sort of non-orthodox sense. I mean, I still identify as a Christian, but I'm definitely a heterodox Christian, because the only type of Christianity I even care about is liberation theology anymore. So, and we can explain a little bit what that means later, but I still have a deep attachment to the Christian community. So I come at this from my starting point from a position of love.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you in the sense of I don't think either of us would be who we are if we hadn't had our pretty strictly evangelical background. We both met, for those listening, at a evangelical college studying theology in one form or another, theology, philosophy of religion, apologetics, whatever, combination thereof. And I don't think either of us see our current, obviously very heterodox secular opinions to be possible without the background of our theological study. They really flowed in a circuitous way from that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think in a very real sense, Troy, I learned love because of you.
This podcast really is about love.
It is about love. I remember when we got set up by a mutual friend who said that we needed to meet each other. This is not a joke, friends. We had a mutual friend who was kind of a mentor to us who said that he needed to connect us and get us together. And then all the long nights eating Chinese food at Mandarin Wong in
full
Saugus.
of MSG.
Yeah, good. I'm probably got some weird puffy sodium disorder because of it, but man, is that place good. Don't worry, we'll come back soon, Mandarin Wong. But it was a love story, a real Romeo and Romeo.
Bromeo.
Bromeo. Shit, we're renaming the podcast tomorrow.
Yeah, the Bromeo podcast. I'm pretty sure the first thing you ever said to me was, hey, what do you think about Wittgenstein?
Yeah, and then I think the first thing that you ever said that really rocked my world was, that something about we think in our language, and for some reason that just sent me down the rabbit hole of studying like philosophy of language and radical skepticism towards dogmatism at that point.
Yeah, the bullshit that college sophomores say in class.
Yeah. So okay. So why don't we start by first explaining what evangelicalism is and kind of giving a historical perspective on that.
Yeah. So I think for our purposes, without delving too deep into the history of American Christianity, we can say that in the 20th century there was a pretty strict separation between what was early called fundamentalism and then later the evangelical movement as a whole. Now, there's a porous boundary between these two because there's definitely cross-contamination in the theological and the social and etc. A lot of people would consider themselves both or not even know what maybe fundamentalism means. Fundamentalism as a term today kind of means extremism, which is not what it really meant in the early 20th century. Fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism, was largely a theological and ecclesiastical movement in the sense that it was about forming usually non-denominational but oftentimes reformed Christian communities that were insular. They didn't really care that much about social issues in the sense of that didn't really affect them. They weren't exactly friends of like the homosexual community or LGBT or anything, but those things didn't concern them as much. Think of like a very deflationary version of the Amish, right? Just nowhere near as extreme. It was that kind of a thing, right? They were isolationists.
This was the emergence of Christian music and Christian radio and Christian poetry and Christian art, right?
Right. They wanted to have their entirely separate ideal community that was theirs.
Okay.
And that was as authentically Christian as they wanted it to be. Whereas evangelicalism was a mostly mid-20th century movement that largely was the opposite. I mean, it cared deeply about changing the political sphere and the social sphere. And they wanted to affect workplaces and families that were not their own, and politics and state government and national government, and these are the people who bought into to Reaganomics as being an almost Christian version of national socioeconomic policy, which is something that the fundamentalists that I don't think would really care all that much about. And while theologically evangelicals and fundamentalists would oftentimes be fairly similar, at least so much so that you couldn't really distinguish between the two, this really comes to a head when you look at fundamentalism basically dead today. It's not much of it at all, and evangelicalism is the movement that triumphed, mostly because I think people just became attracted to that from the fundamentalist strand. They're the ones that are being bought into the Trump phenomenon, right? The fundamentalists, I think those that still exist, including many of the former heads of our former college, would probably see Trump and notice, though, this person is a charlatan. Whereas evangelicals are often trying to, whether consciously or not, convince themselves he is the sort of the new Christian leader of the country. You have James Dobson and Jerry Falwell's kid trying to convince their constituency that Trump is legitimately became a Christian on the campaign trail. like there was no...
How convenient.
Yeah, exactly. And that's legitimate somehow.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So what you mean is that he's the new Christian voice. What that really means is that he is the new capitalist voice, isn't it? Because by Christian, they mean the person who will be able to safeguard moral principles. But really, it seems like more than anything, what he's going to do is protect us from big, bad government. And so they love to call themselves the party of Lincoln, obviously, but really it feels like they're the party of Reagan, right? And so it's ultimately about deregulation, minimizing government. What's that famous quote from Reagan where he talks about big government is the problem or whatever it is?
Yeah, I think the important point there is that, people are so surprised that evangelicals are flocking to Trump since, he's kind of a playboy and he's, a rich demagogue and he's doesn't exactly have the imitatio Dei, isn't that what it's called, right? Certainly doesn't act like a Christian, right? The braggadocio and the lack of humility and things like that. His favorite book of the Bible is, I think he said, the Corinthians, something like that.
The Corinthians.
Yeah, it's obviously a charlatan. But it's because evangelicalism was never really about Christianity. It was never really about religion or theology. It's always been a cultural movement. That's what distinguishes it from classical fundamentalism. It was always about the social hierarchies that are in place, which includes Christian heritage as part of it, we want to keep those. Right? And so it shouldn't be no surprise that people of this stripe are supporting Trump, because that's exactly what he's about, right? He's about demonizing anybody who's not part of that sort of, quote unquote, original America or our America. And to me, it's no surprise that evangelicals are flocking to Trump for that reason.
But what is up with the moral, ethical position of Christianity that is rooted in the idea of taking care of the poor and the needy? Where does that all go when you consider the evangelical tradition? Has that gone? Because there are plenty within the evangelical tradition, individuals and church communities, that still have a very active social outlook. So where does that go?
Yeah, it's like that social gospel movement, right? Which is about bettering the lives of the least of these, right? The real Jesus Pentecost type of life. And it's so funny, leftists always, especially those who haven't some kind of inkling as to the history of Christianity or have glanced at the Bible, will always bring this stuff up, like evangelicals have never heard this before. But it has no import to them whatsoever. It was never about those things. It was never about, it's harder for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. It was never about, sell all your things and follow me. It was never about those things. Evangelicalism has always been an American cultural movement that cared nothing for the history of Christianity or biblical exegesis or living a social gospel life or Pentecostal life or whatever you want to call it. It's never been about that. So when you bring that stuff up, it's just really hand-waved away. Like, you just don't get it.
Right. They would argue that they do proper exegesis, right? That they do actually exposit from the text and they pull from the text. And they would argue that really what those passages are getting at is the spiritual meaning, the individual personal meaning behind those things. And they detach them from all of the social and political contextual meanings that they're really rich with. And that the New Testament, and that even the Old Testament prophets were crazy outliers calling the Levitical priesthood to a more equitable society, railing against the disparity of wealth. And, sodomy really is inhospitality towards neighbors. Read Ezekiel 16, 59 or something like that, or 49. That's really why Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, because the wickedness that they did in God's eyes was that they had great riches and they did not share with their neighbors. So there's a great tradition within the kingdom logic that has always been socio-political that completely gets pressed aside when you look at American evangelicalism in favor of an individualistic, personal, spiritual redemption, relationship, salvation dynamic. And what that means with regards to how you engage with the social world is that it seems like the evangelical world will eschew, I've never had it. How do you say that word? Eschew?
I've heard both.
Eschew/askew any sort.
Well, askew is when something is set aside, right?
Yeah, exactly. Eschew. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And what they do is they eschew any sort of governmental policy that would seek to redistribute wealth in favor of their own personal initiative, right? Like, I want as much money as I can so that I can be charitable and so that I can give money to the poor, so that I can support my family and the local church. And the Christian community oftentimes is very good at that, very supportive of that, right? The evangelical community, we'll say so that we're clear, is very, very good at doing that sort of thing a lot of times. And then there's this gut reaction against any sort of governmental programs that, as JFK would say, a rising tide raises all boats. To them, that is somehow in conflict with the former, with charity. And I see that as being this strange either-or logic that needs to be rejected in favor of a both-and, because you can still be fucking charitable, and you can still take care of your family, and at the same time support governmental principles that will raise all boats, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not mutually exclusive at all if the point of it is to make the lives of the least of these better, or to, in the theological terms, serve God by serving the least of these.
Right.
But that's the thing is, I think the point is, this was never the point of evangelicalism. The point of evangelicalism was never what is beneficial to the poor or making life better for everybody in the community. It's always been about cultural power, keeping the social hierarchies that exist in place and to keep them as they are, right? So, for instance, talking about charity, giving to the poor was never just about bettering the lives of the poor, right? It's not about sort of giving them housing and giving them access to jobs and, maybe even public jobs. It's never been about bettering their lives. It's always been about, having power. So in this case, if the church decides where the money goes, and that means also they decide who gets the money and with what means and how they get it, meaning if they have to come to the church, if they have to become part of the church in some way. So that power dynamic still exists. Whereas if the government, funds social welfare through taxation, then not only do the individuals not get the moral credits, you don't psychologically feel like, oh, I'm the good person who gives money to the poor, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, a psychological explanation and not that terrible if it means giving money to the poor. But it becomes much more nefarious when you think about the fact that with government social welfare, you're also changing power dynamics, right? So if you give someone a government job, right, so a publicly funded job that has benefits and that they can now subsist on and be independent and have a family of their own and do their own thing, then they're no longer in need of the church. They're no longer in need of maybe even the theological background to sort of satisfy the problems of their existence. And that power play changes the whole game, right? That crumple or, it takes apart the social dynamic, and now people are much more equal and can subsist on their own.
See, and to me, that's beautiful. That's the point. That's what's so wonderful about the early Marxist ideas, that he was still interested in realizing the goals of what religion sought to do, which was that he recognized religion was a real cry of the oppressed, right?
Heart of a heartless world, yeah.
Exactly. It was the heart of a heartless world. Cry of the oppressed. And what religion does is it suppresses that cry. And so he wanted to realize the alleviation of that suffering through political means. And that's the point. It's weird. I think you told me a story years ago. Someone told me this story, and I've always attributed it to you, about a movie.
I'll take it.
Yeah. About a movie that you saw where it was like a group of kids that do something with disinterest, and they save somebody or they do something, and people come up to them and they start rewarding them with all of this praise and heaping all this praise upon them, and they kind of look at them like, what are you talking about? Of course we did that. That's just what humans do. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I think Zizek talked about that in terms of moral reflexivity or something, where you do what's right without even deliberating.
Right. Yeah. And to me, I think kind of what you're talking about, this idea of taking away the moral credit that you get for giving to charity or something like that. If you diminish that to some degree, that somehow takes that away from you. Not only your power as an institutional framework within the community, as the evangelical community is, but as an individual within that community, you lose the moral brownie points that you might be able to get by helping out with charity, or at least to as great a degree as you would have otherwise. And I think that there's actually something good about that. It takes away the patting yourself on the back if you're just simply part of a community that is at a higher ethical standard in which there is greater equality and less suffering and things like that.
You know what this means, right?
Oh, no, what?
This entire time you were secretly a Kantian, just like me. You believe in the ethical commonwealth, just like Kant did. Just come on, admit it. All your Deleuze bullshit has really all been about Kant.
Well, Deleuze wrote a book on Kant, so whatever.
Deleuze doesn't write a book on anybody but Deleuze.
That's true. That is true.
I think your point is absolutely on it, in the sense of the moral brownie points we get when we give somebody a Christmas present. Psychologically, it's almost totally innocuous, right? It doesn't really change the action. It feels good, and so what's really all that bad about that? Right. But when you talk about enlarging that to an entire community, where the entire community gets the moral brownie points, then you're talking about a group over against, oppressed, poor, impoverished individuals. That's a power dynamic then. Then it becomes I have the means and the resources and you don't. So you have to basically implicitly do what I say to continue to get those things. That's the same as an abusive relationship, right? And that becomes very different. And when you want to change policy so the government can do it through taxation, then you get rid of that entire dynamic entirely. It's just gone. And that's violence. That's violent change as far as someone's group psychology of the evangelical movement, for instance.
Yeah, so that explains their reactionary fear in opposition to any sort of progressive change, is because It's a direct threat to their very essence, their very being, their very purpose that they have set for themselves.
Yeah, again, and to circle back around, it makes perfect sense that Trump could be seen as a Christian leader in that sense. Not because he knows anything about the Bible, not because he actually professes to be a Christian any time before the last year, but because he represents that same cultural hegemony, those same principles that evangelicalism has basically become in and of itself. It's almost not even religious anymore. It's just an American cultural movement.
Okay, so then ultimately what that means then is that American evangelicalism is necessarily anti-democratic. This violates the separation of church and state by any logic whatsoever, to any degree. This is a violation of separation of church and state. This is the seeking to erect a theocracy. This is anti-democratic, and it's ultimately anti-American.
What do you mean?
So if the community is driven by biblical principles and they're seeking to erect a candidate that is then their figurehead that they see as being the sort of figurehead of this Christian movement, and then they're seeking to implement laws, that's part of the reason that they want a Supreme Court justice that will be favorable to their moral ideas. So they want to keep legal frameworks, political platforms, and social structures in place that are derived from the Bible or a biblical logic or a theological logic that violates the constitutional logic, which necessarily states that there cannot be laws that prize a singular religion or a singular denomination. And even though the Constitution doesn't clearly state that there is this obviously hardline separation of church and state, we know that, the mandate is set forth, and the evangelical community rejects that mandate by seeking to erect themselves as the theocratic power. That's theocracy, that's not democracy. And that is ultimately anti-American.
I certainly see that it's anti-democratic in the sense that it wants to create hierarchies that are, anathema to democracy in its purest form. But would you really say it's anti-American? I mean, is American heritage really democratic to its core?
Well, okay, so it's not democratic to its core. Obviously, the Constitution was written to favor landholders, and obviously black people had no rights, women had no rights, so it's not democratic in its pure historical essence in that sense. But in the sense that it violates the Constitution, and it violates by seeking to erect a singular religion at the expense of all others, and the fact that if we think of Americanism as being a sort of placeholder for an image that is perpetually reordering itself in the seeking of the democratic idea, in that sense it's anti-American.
I guess anti-American in the sense of an America as an idea that's never existed.
Yes.
But could possibly exist.
Yes, exactly. That's what yes, exactly. And it's anti-constitution too, isn't it? I mean, it literally violates the First Amendment. Literally.
Well, I mean, your motivations can be religious for voting without actually enacting or sort of going against the Establishment Clause. But I see what you're saying in terms of, in an ideal sense, it's anti-constitutional. But at the same time, I don't think any of the Founding Fathers actually believed the Establishment Clause should be a guiding principle. Mostly it was just a pragmatic thing, right? Like, hey, Methodists, Lutherans, let's not, hate on each other.
Right.
Let's just chill. I don't think there was ever any belief that we'd ever have a time where we wouldn't have any religious instruction in government. Now, I think we should get to that time.
Yes.
It would be best to do that, obviously. But I wonder how much the Founding Fathers were just being pragmatic in that sense, rather than thinking idealistically about a future secular state.
Hey, can I say something that's totally irreverent right now?
Isn't that all we do?
I don't give a shit what the Founding Fathers thought.
Yeah, I know. Can we stop talking about the Founding Fathers?
Yeah.
As I'm talking about them?
The only time I care about them is when I can use them to deconstruct the conservative logic when they talk about the Founding Fathers. And then I'm like, well, you do realize that Thomas Jefferson wanted armed insurrection every few years. And you do realize that James Madison was not democratic. And that he literally thought democracy...
Masons.
Yeah. That's the only time or when they want to talk about the Constitution, I'm like, well, you do realize that the Constitution literally has written in there to protect landowners, which is aristocracy, not democracy. That's the only time I care about it, is using it to kind of deconstruct. That's it. So, but other than that, I really ultimately, gun to my head, I don't give a shit what those guys thought, man. They thought the world was flat. Well, maybe not, but
no,
they might have thought the world was flat. But B.O.B. thinks the world is flat, and if anyone,
They thought it was flat in the Thomas Friedman sense, probably.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. It's true. I don't know, man. There are people today, B.O.B. and Tila Tequila, think the world is flat.
Hey, democracy of ideas, man. Let them get into the marketplace of ideas and see how it goes.
We're in the marketplace of ideas. You want to espouse something crazy right now? Do you think the world is a square?
No, I think it's a triangle.
Oh, that makes sense. Threes. You're such a Mason. You are a Freemason, aren't you?
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, really, I mean, when it ultimately comes down to it, the Founding Fathers, what they did was absolutely amazing. Peter Howard, actually, for a little while, was writing about the revolutionary spirit of the American Revolution, which leftists oftentimes we forget because we don't like to talk about America. We like to talk about the French Revolution, and we like to talk about Russia and all of these sexy revolutions, right? Or the colonial revolutions, exactly, right? The Algerian Revolution. But we don't like to talk about the American Revolution, and Howard has done some really interesting work to kind of stimulate that, hey, these guys, in their context, in the moment, they were radical crazies. And in that sense, I think there's a sense that we can derive from that I still find appealing. But in terms of trying to get to the original intent, which is first of all a fool's errand, and also I just don't think desirable, isn't something that I have any interest in moving forward.
Yeah, I'm all about that. Let's bring some Thomas Paine common sense back into this bitch.
And he believed in a universal basic income, which it's time to institute that. It's time to institute a universal basic income.
All right, so that's about it on our Meg segment on Trump and evangelicalism.
Yeah, can we just never talk about Trump ever again? Can we? Is that something we can do moving forward? Or is he going to be our president? Is this going to happen and we're going to have to talk about him forever because he's going to erect like the Trump platform for recording podcasts and the Trump microphone and the Trump White House with big gold letters, and so everything's going to be Trump anyway?
How about if he does become president, then we'll just pretend it didn't happen. Like we'll literally do the podcast for 4 years and not mention his name and pretend it didn't happen.
I love it.
It could be a little game. Like that one movie where they pretend that the Berlin Wall didn't fall for this one old lady who was in a coma when it happened.
Oh, I've never seen it.
I forget what it's called, but it was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, they pretend that the regime's still in place. We should do that.
Deal. Well, okay. Well, then let's move on to the next segment, which is the Sticky Leaves. This is a segment where one of us gets to recommend something for the audience, and this week Troy is going to be sharing his Sticky Leaves.
So I've been reading Slaughterhouse-five by Kurt Vonnegut lately, and I'm pretty slow going with fiction with all the teaching and academic work that we got to do. But I read this one passage that I really thought would be fun to do a mini little radio play. For those who haven't read it, the book Slaughterhouse-five is Vonnegut's accounts of the bombing of Dresden, where he was a POW in Germany at the time and witnessed it firsthand. And he wrote the book Slaughterhouse-five to give a satirical, anti-war sentiments-laden account of the bombing of Dresden. Now, the book has aliens and time travel and all sorts of weird stuff, but really, in its essence, it's an anti-war story. And the main character, Billy Pilgrim, is a kind of like Vonnegut, was a POW in Dresden when the bombing happens. And at one point, he travels forward in time to his future self when he's after the war's happened. He's back home and he's dealing with the aftermath. And he watches an account of the bombing of Dresden on TV, except because of his strange life where he's traveling back and forth in time, he watches the account backwards. And the way that Vonnegut describes it, I thought was really beautiful, so I'm going to read it really quickly.
Okay, before you get into it here, let me set it up. I'm going to give you an acting lesson, okay? You got to get into character right now, because this is a radio play, right? So get into character, and while you do that, I'm gonna give you a nice little old-time intro. You ready?
All right, go for it.
All right. And here we are at Owls at Dawn, and the play for tonight is a special reading by the one and only Troy Polidori from Slaughterhouse-five. So please get your hot cocoa and get your fire ready for the fireside reading by Troy Polidori.
Billy Pilgrim went into the living room, swinging the bottle like a dinner bell, turned on the television. Came slightly unstuck in time, saw the late movie backwards, then forwards again. It was a movie about American bombers in the Second World War and the gallant men who flew them. Seen backwards by Billy, the story went like this. American planes, full of holes and wounded men and corpses, took off backwards from an airfield in England. Over France, a few German fighter planes flew at them backwards, sucked bullets and shell fragments from some of the planes and crewmen. They did the same for wrecked American bombers on the ground, and those planes flew up backwards to join the formation. The formation flew backwards over a German city that was in flames. The bombers opened their bomb bay doors, exerted a miraculous magnetism which shrunk the fires, gathered them into cylindrical steel containers, and lifted the containers into the bellies of the planes. The containers were stored neatly in racks. The Germans below had miraculous devices of their own, which were long steel tubes. They used them to suck more fragments from the crewmen and planes. There were still a few wounded Americans, though, and some of the bombers were in bad repair. Over France, though, German fighters came up again, made everything and everybody as good as new. When the bombers got back to their base, the steel cylinders were taken from the racks and shipped back to the United States of America, where factories were operating night and day, dismantling the cylinders, separating the dangerous contents into minerals. Touchingly, it was mainly women who did this work. The minerals were then shipped to specialists in remote areas. It was their business to put them into the ground, to hide them cleverly, so they would never hurt anybody ever again. And scene.
Goddamn, that's beautiful, man. It really is.
You ever had that moment where you're reading a book and you literally have to just stop reading in the middle of a chapter and just go to bed? I think it's happened to me 2 or 3 times in my life, and that was one of them. I was just like, damn, that is some writing right there.
That's beautiful. You know what it reminds me of? Did you ever see Irreversible by Gaspar Noé?
No, I didn't.
Okay. You need to check out that movie. It's a
Are there
movie...
lots of vaginas like most of Gaspar Noé's movies?
No, there is a brutal scene where Monica Bellucci gets... Spoiler alert, if you really want to see... No, it's no spoiler alert. I'm going to steal a page out of Troy's book. Fuck it. Fuck it, we'll do it live! No. Monica Bellucci gets raped. And what happens is the film takes place in reverse. And it's about... There's other stuff that happens, but basically it's about the impossibility of going backwards. And it's about the experimentation of time by getting a reversal of time and looking at a happy couple when they first meet, knowing full well what actually takes place in the future. Rape, physical abuse, hardship, stuff like that. And when you then see them at the end of the movie, but at the beginning of their relationship, there's this strange tension between the outcome that we know is coming and the youthful hopefulness of when they first meet. And I think there's something similar, but even on a more global scale with that passage that you just read. It actually brought a tear to my eye when you were reading. I've never read that before.
Damn, that's dark, dude. That movie. Yikes.
Yeah, it's super dark. Well, I mean, is it any darker than dropping of fucking bombs onto innocent lives? I mean, it's all dark.
Yeah, that's true.
When you start talking about that, it's all evil.
But I just don't want anything bad to ever happen to Monica Bellucci. I think that's my point.
That's so true. That is so true. That's probably why it's even worse in the movie.
All right, so our next segment is bullshitting.
Bullshitting.
This is where we spend a few minutes taking a trending topic of which we know basically nothing.
Bullshitting.
And decide to pontificate. Yeah, that's what bullshitting is called.
Let's bullshit.
And we pontificate for a few minutes without any knowledge whatsoever. As Zizek once said, it's best to analyze a movie before you've ever even seen it. That's what we're going to do.
No, but we're kind of going to cheat because I have seen the Olympics before, which is what we're going to talk about today.
This is true. We know of the Olympics. It's an acquaintance of ours.
Yeah. And I did watch 2 things, actually, from the Olympics from yesterday. One was a beach volleyball match, and one was the gruesome video of that French gymnast who jacked up his leg. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. I didn't see it, though.
Dang. It's like that, the breaking, the shin injury that Muay Thai fighters get when their shin literally breaks in half. What is it, the tibular or the fibula or whatever it is right there? And it literally breaks in half.
Full compound fracture.
Oh, dude. No, it's so gnarly. Grosses me out.
So are the Olympics becoming torture porn like NASCAR now?
Exactly. I hope not, man. Although every time a diver goes off and does a 360 thing, I secretly hope he's doing a Greg Louganis. And minus the AIDS, but whapping his head on the diving board. Did you see that? Oh, I did. I saw another video. I saw the Filipino diver that basically did a belly flop.
Are you serious? I gotta check that out.
See, this is the problem with the age of the internet. The Olympics didn't used to be torture porn. And now it is, because it's just all of the clips of all of the blunders and stuff like that. So anytime something silly happens, like a bullet that went stray and went into the media tent, which happened at the Olympics as well, or the gymnast that breaks his leg, or the Filipino diver who does a belly flop, that's the stuff that's going to get made viral.
So there's like some Nietzschean ressentiment in this, right? We're watching the greatest athletes in the world who are doing physical activities that, well, you're pretty athletic, so you could probably do some of this stuff, but the rest of us can only dream of doing some of these things. And watching them screw up in their physical exertion, like, that's joyful. That's some Schadenfreude that's on another level, man.
That's dark, man, but yeah, that's exactly right, though. I don't know. I don't want to see anybody get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch the U.S. men's basketball team, which is the only Olympics I really ever watch, and they're beating China by 70 points, you just want to see them dunk on some gargantuan.
Yes, like I will never forget when who was it? Vince Carter that literally over that 7-foot fucker.
Frederick Weiss.
Oh, that was so sick.
That was American imperialism in its utter essence.
Dude, that is it. That's what the Olympics is about. I want to see Usain Bolt fucking fly. I want to see him fly. I want to see him run 100 meters in 4 seconds. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, what would happen if Usain Bolt did that and then he exploded?
Then he goes out on a flame of glory, dude.
Yeah.
That's
that'd be
perfect.
Great.
Yeah. Then
or to see him trip over his own feet.
Yeah, see, I don't want to see that one. I want to see greatness. That's like why I like LeBron, right? I like greatness. That's why I got a man crush on Tom Brady. I want to see the greats perform. There's something about witnessing greatness that I enjoy.
That seems much more pure than the Schadenfreude stuff we're talking about earlier.
Well, I'm a purist, man. That's me, Austin the purist. That's what they call me on the street.
That's your late 80s hip hop moniker?
Yeah, Austin the Pure.
Up on the mic.
That's right. Actually, that's actually not a bad name. That's what you're going to call me from now on, if that's cool. Austin the Pure. I'm going to have it legally changed. But no, but I do. Like, I want to see the women's soccer team dominate. I want to see, God, I'm trying to think. I want to see Chinese gymnasts just do some freaky stuff where they just get scores through the roof, like perfect 10s or 5s or however they scored. I don't know how they score it. But I want to see that. I want to see dominance. I want to see the excellence of human optimal physicality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. I want to see someone get a badminton birdie lodged into their leg.
No.
I want to see Chinese guys playing ping pong and knocking the ball in someone else's eye.
Oh, Jesus. You're taking this the completely other way.
Yeah, no, I'm getting a little too sardonic here.
Yeah. Do you like the Olympics at all?
No.
Really? Well, okay. So
I
besides from like, the bullshit nationalism.
Sorry?
I said besides from like the bullshit nationalism or patriotism as it's masked, is there something interesting though about the athletic competitions that you enjoy?
No. I mean,
Really?
I enjoy when one of the American players dunks on a guy. It's pretty legit. But other than that,
Really, that's it.
like I don't want to watch guys swim.
Why not?
I don't guys who look like fish who have 24-inch long feet.
Yeah. That's interesting. They're genetic freaks, and then they're excelling within the conditions that they have been given.
Yeah, I guess, man.
That's not your thing, huh? So what do you think, if you really want to go down the cynical route, what do you think about all of the problems that have surrounded the Rio Games?
I haven't even given a thought to it.
Really? Okay.
Not in an ideological sense.
Well, so from a socio-political perspective, it's interesting, right? I don't know who it is that actually builds all the stadiums and whatnot, but they were running low on funds, and so they had to borrow gobs of money from the Brazilian government, who are already struggling with massive poverty and crime in the favelas, and all about Rio de Janeiro, and so, I mean, and obviously other cities as well, but Rio is apparently one of the more violent cities in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And so these Olympics, is it an injection of capital? Are they bringing a positive revenue stream that will lead to any sort of social benefits? Or is it more just neoliberal logic getting in there and furthering exploitation while lining the pockets of the few?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've heard before that whenever the Olympics are at in a city that, unless it's, already a wealthy capital of some Western nation, that they usually end up losing a lot of money in the long run.
They
divert funds from social programs into building giant stadiums and stuff, which never get used after the Olympics are over.
Yeah, and then again, there's that strange neoliberal logic, right? The idea that it creates jobs or something of that nature, and that it stimulates the economy ultimately. But really, it doesn't. It just lines the pockets of a few. And maybe it temporarily creates some manufacturing jobs or some construction jobs or some service jobs, but that in the long term, that it doesn't actually benefit anything, because neoliberal logic is ultimately about short-term gain rather than long-term development. This sounds terrible, so why do we give a fuck about the Olympics then? People are breaking their legs, it's this weird Schadenfreude, torture porn,
Usain Bolt's not exploding.
Yeah, so why do we watch the Olympics?
Exactly.
Oh, is that it? That's the answer?
That was my point.
That's the answer?
Don't watch the Olympics.
Okay.
Or just watch it on Vine so you can watch the, disaster porn stuff, but other than that.
Or I'm going to say watch it on Vine so you can watch the human successes.
Yeah, that's human success. Not ending poverty, right? Not getting to Mars. No, it's running really fast. Swimming faster than some
Kobe
guy from
Bryant is your
Greece.
favorite athlete. Get off your moral high horse right now.
Dude, don't embarrass me on my podcast.
How is that embarrassing? You got to own that shit, man.
Yeah, Kobe's kind of a dick, but he was my childhood hero. I grew up in Los Angeles, people. Forgive me, all right? What was I supposed to do? Not love him?
I grew up in Los Angeles, and he's not my favorite athlete.
Orange County is not Los Angeles, dude. You're a different country.
That is a very good point. All right, well, fuck the Olympics then. Nobody watched the Olympics. Get over it. Just go read a book or something nerdy. That'll be better.
Amen to that. All right, so our next segment is throwing it to our hip-hop correspondent, Michael Burns. You've named him M. Breezy. I think that's stupid, but whatever.
Yeah, he didn't actually acknowledge that, so I want to see how he feels about that. I feel at some point in one of our conversations over some beers, he either jokingly referred to himself as M. Breezy or something. I don't know why that sticks in my head. So Burnsy, who now I'm actually calling L. Ron Burnsy, because he has this strange obsession and fascination with Scientology, not in like he actually wants to be a part of it or anything, but he's in LA right now on a temporary sort of stay while he's out there on break from teaching. He's been Snapchatting all about Scientology, he and a couple of his buddies. So, L. Ron Burnsy.
That's a legit pseudonym.
I know, right? I can see that in the record store, or in the iTunes store, as they would say nowadays. But yeah, I don't know what to call him anymore. So, like Michael, that just feels wrong. Michael Burns, Mike, M. Breezy, L. Ron Burnsy, I don't know what to do.
He needs to give us an official moniker we can use.
Yeah, go.
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hello, this is Michael. I'm here with The Week in Hip Hop. I do want to say I hear there's some slander happening with the gentleman that hosts this podcast involving nicknames, monikers, and the like. But as truth would have it, I'm just a 31-year-old man named Michael. Nothing more, nothing less. I think unless you are a rapper or a professional wrestler, nicknames after your 20s are kind of a bad look. As evidence for this point, we have people like Bono and The Edge. But let's get back to it. This week, not a ton to be honest, but I'm still going to try to hold you down with some new stuff to listen to. And this week I am coming to you from what might be the least hip-hop place in the United States of America, which is an undisclosed location in northern Minnesota, but we'll still do the damn thing. And speaking of Minnesota, first thing I want to tell you about this week, Atmosphere have a new video out. Atmosphere, probably the most notable hip-hop group to ever come out of the state of Minnesota, but they have a new video for a new track off their new record. It's called Pure Evil, and the song and the video both address police brutality, obviously something that unfortunately we have to think about and talk about these days. But it's a really powerful video, and I will tell you this, if you watch it, about 2.5 minutes in, you get to watch a cop burn his badge and his uniform and get on his knees naked before the fire that he has burned them in. And it's also a really good song. So check that out, Pure Evil by Atmosphere. That's our Minnesota segment for the episode. Now let's get to some tracks that came out this week I think you should look at. First thing, we have a new song this week from Isaiah Rashad. He is probably the lowest key member of TDE. A really, really great artist, though. And this coincides with a tweet from TDE president David Free this week that just said 9/02/16, which leads us to believe there might be a new TDE album coming out in about a month. And maybe this song is from that record, but it's a song by Rashad, once again, called Free Lunch. It's really good, soulful, kind of jazzy, has some really good lines in there. Annoyingly, it's only available on iTunes. So if you got Apple Music, you can listen to it, or if you want to pay the 99 cents and download it. But Free Lunch, Great song. Another thing I wanted to tell you about this week is a song from the group calling themselves Sweatshop Boys, which features Heems of Das Racist fame, and then Riz MC, which is actually Riz Ahmed. Some of you might know him from the really fucking incredible show The Night Of, currently on HBO. He also plays a Mark Zuckerberg type in the new Jason Bourne movie, if you're into that sort of thing. But here he is just Riz MC, and the track is called Terminal 5, and it's about being selected for a random search at the airport. Heems and Riz MC are collectively of Indian and Pakistani descent, so they are exploring what it's like to be an Indian or a Pakistani guy trying to get through the airport in this fucked up world we live in. But it's a really good track. It explores some important ideas in a fun way. And it's really dope to see an English and an American MC linking together. There's not a lot of interplay between the UK and the US in terms of hip-hop. So I'm excited about their full length that's coming out pretty soon. So I will keep you up on that. Another thing that came out this week that's worth a listen is the 773 Freestyle by Vic Mensa and Joey Purp, two young Chicago rappers. Just a really good track to listen to. The two spar back and forth, some good lines, good production. It's worth a listen. 773 Freestyle, Chicago area code, by the way, by Vic Mensa and Joey Purp. And if you haven't listened to Joey Purp's project that came out earlier this year, and I feel like this one was kind of off the radar for a lot of people, please listen to his mixtape. It's called I Drops, so it's I Drops. Really strong project, so give that a listen to if you have not already. Final thing I wanted to tell you about this week, some of you might be surprised to hear this from me, but I think the best thing that came out this week is the new mixtape by 2 Chainz called Daniel's Son, Necklace Don. Once again, that is Daniel's Son, Necklace Don by 2 Chainz. And the standout tracks on that, I think, are Kilo and Blessing. Blessing in particular, one of the best songs I've heard in a while. It's really, really fucking good. So go download that, and I'm pretty sure you can get that one for free. And one last thing. I told you last week we were going to have new Frank Ocean. We do not have new Frank Ocean. We will never have new Frank Ocean. I think Frank Ocean's dead. So, sorry to break the news. I don't think it's happening. I think he's gone. But that's it for This Week in Hip Hop. I'm Michael. I'm in Minnesota. I'm out. Back to those guys.
Cruising the sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling faster than man has ever traveled before.
All right, sweet. Well, thank you, Michael. So the artists that he wants us to check out are Atmosphere, Minnesota's finest, 2 Chainz, Riz MC, Rashad, Isaiah or Isaiah, I'm not sure. How do you think he says it? Isaiah or Isaiah?
I don't know. Are we going full on Hebrew Bible here?
Is that Isaiah?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Isaiah Rashad. And then the 773 Freestyle by Vic Mensa and Joey Purp. I know, 2 Chainz I know, but Atmosphere, they had an album a few years ago that was called When Life Gives You Lemons, Paint That Shit Gold. And they had this one track on there that it was about waking up hungover, and you wake up hungover and you're remembering everything that's going on, and like your phone is going off in your pocket and you've got this crazy headache and you've got to throw up, and they use really cool metaphors, like visual metaphors, to kind of bring you into this scene. At least me, since I've been in that situation before. It brings you into that scenario, right, where you're waking up on the bathroom floor and all that other shit, and then you're walking around the house, and then there's a twist at the end, and the twist is, oh shit, this is your house, this is your life. You know, you think that you wake up on somebody else's floor, but no, man, this is just you. This is your life. This is a standard thing. So, but that was but the other dudes, I don't really have any idea who they are.
Yeah, I'd never heard of any of those artists, other than I've heard of Vic Mensa, and I was aware of Riz Ahmed as the guy from The Night Of.
The Night
and
Of,
he's
yeah.
awesome in that show. I had no idea he did hip hop.
Yeah.
And obviously 2 Chainz. I was aware of 2 Chainz simply by the fact that he's an Atlanta Hawks fan and is like their celebrity mascot, basically. I don't know if you know that, but they have a 2 Chainz night in Atlanta for the Hawks every year.
No
and
shit.
they hand out jerseys that have big ol' gold chain as a label print on the actual like jersey shirt.
No way.
Yeah, it's pretty legit.
Oh, that's pretty legit.
That's the only way that I knew 2 Chainz existed.
2 Chainz, like what has he done a song? Do you know like that I would know? He has to have, right?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to Google him. I'm curious now. I just know the name, but I've actually never heard any of his music. I don't think.
Yeah, what are we gonna do about Mike not so subtly calling us Bono and the Edge, or at least associating us with them?
I mean, look, as long as I'm not Bono, then that's fine.
Okay, so I was gonna ask, which of us is Bono, which is the Edge? Because you're definitely Bono, and I'm definitely the Edge.
I knew that was gonna happen. I knew that was the case. Look, man, if I'm in my 60s and I still wear sunglasses indoors, you need to just put a bullet in my head. There are 2 things. If I'm 60 and I'm still wearing sunglasses indoors everywhere I go, or if I walk around wearing Tommy Bahama, I've given up on life. And at that point, it's time to just put me out to pasture.
Yeah, I feel like Bono and the Edge is our darkest timeline. Like if I get into skull caps and buying multiple houses on Malibu properties that end up destroying the scenic environment, and then you decide to sell your soul to find ways to alleviate poverty in third world countries without actually doing anything, but enhancing your ego, that would be our darkest timeline.
Yeah. Is that the future for the Owls at Dawn?
Yeah, if this podcast takes off, and that's where we go.
Stay tuned.
All right, that's this week with Owls at Dawn. Das Vidania, Amerikanski.